Who is the better dynasty wide receiver moving forward between Ricky Pearsall and Rome Odunze? Both of these guys obviously came in as first round picks, but neither one of them was able to put up many great games in fantasy football. On one hand, you've got Rome Odunze. This guy flashed dominance in a couple big fantasy games and has better things coming for sure with Keenan Allen gone and a big coaching change. And on the other hand, you've got Ricky Pearsall. Some big games towards the end of the year should solidify an important role for him in 2024 in a more stable offense, but there's definitely still questions when it comes to dynasty for both of these guys. So we're going to find out who's the better dynasty wide receiver today, but make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So getting into our first guy, Rome Odunze right now. This guy has the higher draft capital. He's definitely more, well-liked in the dynasty community. I think that this is a good place to start with right here. Whenever I do these breakdowns between one player and another player, I always like to incorporate my personal dynasty rookie wide receiver prospect model, which I have absolutely honed in on and solidified over the last several years to find out what are the most important traits for a wide receiver as they head into dynasty fantasy football out of college. And there are 4 particular things that I have identified we're going to go through today. So the first one is the college breakout year. Essentially what this determines to me is how soon, you're going to be able to adjust to the speed of the NFL. We want earlier breakouts when we're talking about this metric right here, because that shows that these guys don't need much acquisition time and they can just really kind of hit the ground running out of the gate in the NFL. And I think this is probably another reason why Rome had a slower start to the year, in addition to all the other things we'll cover later in this video, because he was a junior year breakout. Now, usually a junior breakout gets a C+ grade from me, but I will say this. Some people have said this is a little bit of a cheap shot, calling him a junior breakout. That's just the reality, number one. But number two, I will give them this. He did have a screwy year because of 2020 and the COVID year. So we'll give him a little bit of a pass for that, give him a B- grade. But I do consider that to be a potential factor into why he had a slower start to his NFL career as well. Now, the most important thing, easily the most important, it's not even debatable, it's not up for discussion, is the film breakdown grade. Now, the reason you don't hear a lot of dynasty people talk about film in their videos is because film obviously is really subjective. Well, I've been watching film forever. I've been watching football since I can remember being alive. And what I always have focused on, particularly, is wide receivers. That was the position I played for most of my years when I played football. It's just a natural position that I've always been drawn to. So I have found out what exactly I'm looking for when it comes to film, when it comes to dynasty fantasy football, and what's transferable most of the time from college film. What I'm looking for is how many layers a receiver has to his game. Can he go deep? Can he go over the middle? Can he go short on routes? Is he a great separator? What's his footwork like? Is he mainly a deep threat, or is he only in a slot much? All those things go into effect when I'm grading these guys on film. And Rome Odunze had an A grade. I really like Rome Odunze. There was one thing, of course, that I always was concerned about with him out of college, was the fact that most of his production came down the field with Michael Penix in Washington. But nonetheless, he dominated at that, so that's why he got an A grade, because he was just so dominant when he was doing it. Now, the next important thing here is, what was the target share in the last year of college? This is going to show me kind of how important they were to their college offense and how much they were able to dominate with a particular target share. When a guy has like a 10% target share and he's able to catch all of his balls, good. I expect you to be able to do that if they're all catchable. If you have a 25 or 30% target share, that shows that you're the clear dominator on your team, and you probably will be or have a chance to be moving forward. And Rome had a 25.2% target share in 2023. Final year at Washington, he was great. That's an A grade. And of course, the NFL draft capital is my last important thing that absolutely needs to be a part of it, because this determines how short or long of a leash a player will have at the NFL level. And Rome Odunze was, of course, a first-round pick. As you can see on the screen, he had like 6 targets per game, 3 receptions per game, only 3 receiving touchdowns, and about 7 fantasy points per game in a half PPR format. Now, when we break it down on a little more granular level here, what we'll see is that he had 3 10-point games in a half PPR format, and he also had 3 10-plus target games in a half PPR format as well. And there was also 2 100-yard receiving games. So again, the reason I'm outlining that right there is because that's kind of the indicator of, is this guy going to be a dominator at the NFL level at some point moving forward? He had some ability. Obviously, Rome Odunze, a very talented guy. It transferred to the NFL in particular games, but it obviously was not always the case because there's DJ Moore and he was a rookie and there's a lot of other factors that went into him not being as consistently relied upon as a big-time target for them. Now, the irony of all this, in my opinion, is when you look at what he was doing on a snap care percentage, this guy was on the field the majority of the season. He had only one game with less than 70% of the snaps. So this guy was constantly on the field. He was always a part of this offense because they were always running 3 wide receiver sets, which most teams do, by the way, these days. But here's the reality of this one, in my opinion. Remember in the pre-draft season in 2024 where all 3 Chicago wide receivers were top 35 wide receivers, both on Underdog. You can go to Underdog and see that. You could go to Sleeper app and see that. You could go to ESPN and you would have seen that. All these wide receivers, all 3 of them, would have cost you a top 35 wide receiver price. That was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. Not with a rookie quarterback. It was just never going to happen. And unfortunately, Rome was the odd man out. Now, some dynasty owners after the season are, concerned. What's going to happen? Is he going to work out? Is he going to be the future of Chicago? Here's some important things to remember moving forward with Rome and his situation. So, Rome flashed dominance. As we just went through, he had 3 10-plus point games, 3 10-plus target games, and 200-yard games. That's not very great, but, we're scraping a little bit bottom of the barrel, especially with 10-plus point games. But I do think that there's enough there to show that he does have the capability to dominate a game. Caleb and Rome are also going to grow together this year. This is a huge thing that both rookie quarterback and rookie wide receiver coming into their second year together are going to get tons of offseason time. They've got a full NFL season underneath their belt. And reports are doubting that Keenan Allen's going to be back with this team in 2025. So obviously that's going to be a huge obstacle out of the way of Rome Odunze as far as what he could be able to do in 2025. And of course, the biggest domino to fall, in my opinion, if you don't see it this way, you need to look at this one. Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson becoming the head coach, former offensive coordinator for years in Detroit, where they were extremely successful offensively. Yes, he was a run-first guy in Detroit. But is that because they had, he was a run-first philosophy type of guy? Or is it just because they had the most dominant 2-back system? They had such a lethal 1-2 combo. It's I would be stupid not to use these 2 running backs as the integral part of my game plan every single time I go out there. What was it? I think it was probably a little bit of both, right? Because Ben Johnson, I do think, obviously saw the upside that both these running backs brought him, but at the same time, maybe he is a little bit more of a run-first guy. My point being is that great offensive minds, they typically are able to utilize their best weapons regardless of what position they play. And in Chicago's case, that's the pass catchers right there. So while I don't necessarily see him passing DJ Moore anytime soon as their wide receiver 1 in Chicago, he's still too young for him to do that. If Ben Johnson is able to work in this offense, I can absolutely see Rome having top 20, top 15 seasons as a wide receiver 2 in Chicago's offense, similar to what T. Higgins has been able to do in the past, similar to what guys like Devonta Smith have been able to do in the past, Jalen Waddle have been able to do in the past. I could absolutely see that side for Rome if things with Ben Johnson come to fruition. Here comes Ricky. Let's talk about Ricky. Ricky. Let's put him in the prospect model right now. College breakout year, he was a junior. C+ grade because he was not affected by COVID in his early parts of college. In fact, he was actually a pretty old rookie when he came out of the league. He was a year older than Rome Odunze, so I'm not cutting Ricky as much slack here. Film breakdown grade. I gave him a B. I do think that Ricky, what he was able to show even in the NFL, is the ability to make really good contested catches. Great hands catcher. This guy runs slick routes right here. He can go over the middle. He can go over the top. This guy did have multiple layers to his game that I absolutely did like coming into the NFL, and obviously, like I said, had some moments this year that we'll discuss in a little bit. Now, his 2023 target share was also really strong, 23.1%, A- grade right there. Not quite as important and integral to his offense as Rome Odunze was, but I do believe that Rome Odunze obviously was in a better passing situation than what Ricky Pearsall had at Florida in his final year in college. So that factors into it as well. And then we've got the NFL draft capital, of course, being a first-round pick. pick right at the back of the first round right there. So let's get out of the way of the prospect model right now. Let's get into his numbers and what he was able to do this year and my outlook for him in the future. First of all, the guy missed 6 games because he almost died, right? Like, nobody forgets. Don't forget about that. The guy almost died. He almost didn't make it to his rookie year. God bless him. He made it, and he was able to come back after 6 games, 4 targets a game, 3 receptions per game, 3 touchdowns, 7.1 fantasy points per game. So if we're just lining them up on a points per game and just a production per game perspective, Rome and Ricky absolutely had very similar rookie seasons, 100%. Like Rome Odunze, had some big moments as well. 3 games with 10 plus points in a half PPR format. 1 game with 10 targets, not as many as Rome had, and only 1 game with 100 receiving yards. So not as quite as dominant as frequently as Rome Odunze was, but he definitely did have his moments, especially at the end of the year for a lot of people who were competing for fantasy championships. Now, unlike Rome, the plan wasn't for him to immediately have a big role, right? It was never going to be the case for Ricky Pearsall. They had Brandon Ayuk, they had Deebo Samuel, they had Juwan Jennings that people forgot about up until this year when he became a dominator all of a sudden. But then, of course, the 49ers, and I've said this a lot this season, they had the season from hell. Ayuk tore an ACL basically, almost midway through the season, but he sucked up to that point. Deebo Samuel, he sucked up to that point. So Ricky Pearsall, like weeks after getting freaking shot, was basically forced to play as soon as the guy could play. And he did well. I think hats off to him, all things considered. So when you look at him a little closer, he had only 1 game below 50% of the snaps. So again, this guy was consistently out there whenever he was active for the San Francisco 49ers. Definitely wasn't always the main target or anything like that. Numbers don't back that up. But the guy was on the field pretty much all the time for this offense. Worth noting also, Brock Purdy had a bad year. He just did. Brock Purdy was not nearly as good as he had been in years prior. And this was a big year for Brock Purdy. But again, I think it's also worth noting this. The offensive line was injured. The running backs couldn't stay healthy. The receivers couldn't stay healthy. Like I said, this was the season from hell for the San Francisco 49ers. Like, it's hard for Brock Purdy, who's not a particularly mobile guy, to be able to, evade pass rushers that are in his face constantly and find his wide receivers. That's just not his game. He's not that good of a quarterback. But is he good enough to get absolutely great fantasy production out of wide receivers? We've seen it with Deebo. We've seen it with Ayuk. Of course he's able to do that. This team was running skeleton crew all year long. Now, when it comes to Ricky and his future, look, there's plenty of hurdles that I think that he still needs to clear particularly. Ayuk was just signed. Even though I don't think it was a good move, I think they should have just let him walk or traded him or whatever they wanted to do with him. I think they absolutely should not have signed him. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. He probably will not be as explosive, at least in 2025, after the ACL injury. But he's still under contract. I doubt he's really going anywhere in particular. The guy that I think has the best chance of getting jettisoned is Deebo. Now, trade rumors about Deebo have been swirling the last several weeks. I think it's possible. I think it's more likely that he gets traded than Brandon Ayuk. But John Lynch committed to Deebo basically several weeks back after their season ended. So at least by word of mouth, John Lynch isn't looking to trade him right out of the gate. Juwan Jennings is going to be a free agent after 2025. But I do believe that they will make some sort of change this offseason. Whether it's a Deebo Samuel trade, whether it's a Brandon Ayuk trade. Like I said, I think Deebo's probably more likely to get traded than Brandon Ayuk, but I could probably see either one of those happening. To me, there's just definitely an air of uncertainty in San Francisco's building right now. Like, I feel like almost they were forced to go into a rebuild. A little bit. Like, it doesn't feel like this team is going to be looking the exact same as it was heading into 2024 when we head into 2025. I think there's going to be a lot of changes to this team, and they could be good for Ricky, but what I will say about that is lots of movement is not always a great thing for younger players into the NFL. So when I look at both of these guys stacked up, both of these guys were first-round talent, so obviously their leash on their teams is going to be long, especially since they both flashed in their rookie seasons. One of them has a proven great offensive mind. Kyle Shanahan absolutely is the proven guy. Other one we have high hopes for. He's a great offensive mind, but will he be a great head coach? That remains to be seen with Ben Johnson. But to me, I think what it comes down to is that Rome just has an easier climb than Ricky Pearsall does. Rome has an easier path to becoming his wide receiver 2 on his team than Ricky Pearsall does. I think there's more athletic ability and more long-term upside there with Rome Odunze, so that's why in a dynasty format, I would always go Rome Odunze right now in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So let me know who you're picking in Dynasty, and if you want to see the top running back prospects in this year's rookie class, click on this video right here.